Okay, this is a rant against mainly city council and the mayor of Toronto. I've been uh, over the years I've been proud to be a member of the Ontario Coalition Against Poverty, or OCAP, uh, which has just done some amazing, some awesome rallies and protests and direct action at various uh, events, at various places in the city, in buildings owned by the province or the city. So one of the big and continuing protests is the lack of affordable housing, as you probably heard on some of my other rants. The lack of housing for homeless people. And I'm very upset, angry to say the least, at cities' lack of action to build the necessary housing for people on the street whom I meet every day. So I've called this rant Helter Skelter. It's inspired by the non-acting, the very, I think it's correct to call him very contemptuous and ineffective mayor. That's Toronto Mayor John Tory, and the Toronto City Council, which does virtually nothing to help the homelessness, the housing crisis in Toronto. You do nothing, non-liberal politicians. You shout housing strategy and poverty reduction. You don't give a damn about housing the poor and never have. You sit on your fat, sellout corporate co-opted ass, refusing to name the homeless housing crisis a national emergency, refusing to build and fund more shelters, more affordable housing for the homeless, poor, disabled, for the psychiatrized, for the indigenous, for the immigrants, the migrants, the refugees. You finally voted for 1,000 beds thanks to OCAP protests. Show us the beds. Show us the money for a change. While 6,000 homeless brothers and sisters struggle to survive on mean streets and violent shelters, more than 800 have died in Toronto since year 2000. You're willfully ignorant of 2 deaths a week most of the time. Many unreported in cold, dark alleyways and laneways. Near John, Simcoe, Sherbourne, Parliament. Yeah. On Mississauga First Nations territory. On Fort Credit First Nations territory. In 30 to 40 below in the dead of winter, while you coldly refuse to reopen Fort York and Moss Park armories you closed in 2017, or maybe it was 2016. More sickness, more homeless deaths, more collateral damage in your war against the poor, the homeless, the indigenous, your housing strategy and poverty reduction, a cruel sham, a national shame, a political fraud, a broken election promise, while thousands of poor pan and freeze on mean streets, deserted laneways, alleyways. See that old woman? See that spaced out teen, that teenager curled up on a floor mat at a respite center, at a shelter? like a fetus twisted around its mother's umbilical cord, while you sit stiff, stoned in front of your condo stone fireplaces, warming your cold hearts, your bigoted brains, while thousands of addicted, homeless, and poor die preventable fentanyl deaths, hands, feet, fingers, faces frozen numb, squatting on Parliament Hill, Queen's Park, Bay and King, pleading for spare change, spare care. Yeah, concerned citizens nowhere, corrupt CEOs, politicians everywhere and nowhere, while they profit from tax evasion, tax fraud, insider trading, while they vote $1 million tax breaks and bonuses for themselves, self-serving counselors, Premier Ford, and friends of the rich who lie and hide investments in offshore islands, real estate criminals that exploit profit, gentrify the poor, while Gordon Gekko and Donald Trump shout, greed is good, greed is good. While the homeless, marginalized, stigmatized, suicide, too depressed, too weak to walk, to stand up or help, suicidal indigenous children, homeless, traumatized, forced to eat day-old tuna fish and macaroni and cheese sandwiches at understocked, understaffed food banks on indigenous land, fighting hunger, genocide. While you feast, you counselors, you feast on steak and lobster at the Keg, while you fucking private pubs, Yorkville backrooms, while homeless child runaways end up scared on hellfare, not welfare, while disabled, demented old men, pensioned seniors try to escape abuse by dozing, dreaming, hearing voices, while spaced out brothers and sisters inject meth, crack, fentanyl for breakfast, lunch, dinner, swallow poisons prescribed by drug pushers in white coats, who psychiatrize, criminalize, marginalize, stigmatize, in the name of mental health and health care, oh yes, in the name of safe and effective medication and electroshock, that brain damage, burnt out brains, demented seniors with Alzheimer's at 45 in homes for the aged, forget where they are, where they're going, who they are, while others staggered, shaking with Parkinson's, in cities on stolen and raped First Nations land, where black and indigenous survivors are rejected at warming, cooling respite centers, rejected at overcrowded, substandard, stinking shelters, where official bouncers tell lost souls, get lost, get a job, while there's spare space on cold, hard floor mats, where snoring men lie sick in bed bug blankets, their infected feet poked in nightmare faces, while gouging Parkdale landlords on the take evict pregnant teens headed for Jesse's, while thousands of asylum seekers, migrants from Mexico, El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, the United States force themselves to walk in long lines, courageous men, women, children, trekkers, trudging in 100 or more degree, 100 degree, maybe 120 degree heat, blankets, tents, babies on their backs, separated, demonized by Trump as invaders, for God's sake, at militarized borders, escaping prosecution, escaping gang violence, poverty, early death, walking along centuries old endless miles of biblical caravans. Stop, search threatened by U.S. border police and soldiers, imprisoned months or years in America's and Canada's detention centers, shelters, snake pits, unfit for children and animals. While councilors, mayors, governors, premiers, police, the RCMP jail black and brown and indigenous kids, nursing mothers, old men, criminalized, stigmatized, surviving on handouts and welfare, while privileged rich white men, city and provincial bureaucrats deny and lie about homelessness, hunger, poverty, and other daily preventable crises and national emergencies like racism, white supremacy, inequality, pollution, climate change, dead issues in city councils, provincial legislatures, and parliament, of secret deals, while politicians declare war against asylum seekers, against migrants, against refugees, against the homeless, against the poor, against the disabled, against black and indigenous citizens, against democracy, against humanity. Oh, Canada, oh, America, America, KKK. City councils refuse to expand women's shelters and warming centers. Why? While thousands of homeless die for a fix, a warm room, while they pan for non-existent affordable bachelors. In Toronto, Ottawa, Winnipeg, Calgary, Vancouver, $1,000 rents that don't eat up underfunded ODSP, while you refuse to fund more respite centers, drop-ins, sanctuaries that you complain cost too much. They cost too much in your fraudulent budgets, while you refuse to vote for 10,000 affordable housing units. Tories' 10-year 40,000 targets. How many times have we heard that? Another affordable housing sham, another poverty reduction fraud as housing crises and homeless deaths go through the roof. As shelters strain and break down at 95%, 96% capacity, disease-ridden third world hellholes where poor indigenous women and brain-damaged, so-called mentally ill, are evicted by sexist, racist security guards and landlords. Brothers and sisters, livable ODSP, Ontario Works are libeled, where alienated students, poor immigrants, jobless immigrants are threatened, harassed, discriminated against by bully teachers, sexist guidance counselors who call racist police bullies in black and blue, arrive and arrest while you patronize, stigmatize disabled, burnt-out workers, demented seniors and souls overdosed on meth, crack, fentanyl, brain damaged on antipsychotics, chemical babysitters for seniors and disabled in nursing homes and geriatric wards where racist slurs, physical assaults are treatment for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, by untrained, ignorant, incompetent staff in nursing homes in homes for special neglect, in sheltered death traps in emergency wards that demonize the forgotten homeless poor, unwanted, the psychiatrized, the marginalized. Remember the Nazis murdered Untermenschen, subhumans they're called, in T4. Today's T4 murderers are more civilized, dressed and protected in white coats and lying administrators. They kill with shock, drugs, seclusion, physical restraints. They discharge poor people to the street on CTOs, community treatment orders. They discharge the homeless to diseased, overcrowded, violent shelters, standard practice in state and provincial snake pits, shock mills, youth and migrant detention centers, jails, prisons, where separated, lost children search in vain for mothers, for hugs, for food, for medicine, for hope, for love, while brother and sister seniors sit spaced out staring all day at TV in wheelchairs going, nowhere, 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 while psychiatrized brothers and sisters languish in 24-hour isolation, seclusion rooms, solitary confinement, cruel and usual punishment, treatment for disobedience, dissidence, non-compliance. Resistance is the order of the day. Working class citizens discharged, homeless, penniless, stoned, no direction home, while brother and sister survivors pan for spare change, spare hope. Hey mayor, hey councilor, hey minister, hey premier Ford, can you spare a loonie? Can you spare a toonie for coffee? While brothers and sisters try to heal abuse, trauma, torture, Parkinson's, dementia, TD, that's tardive dyskinesia, neuroleptic malignant syndrome, and other side effects of safe and effective meds and ECT. While black, brown, red, brothers, sisters, seniors, kids get depressed, suicidal, on 5-year social housing waiting lists, waiting, dying for unaffordable bachelors, 1, 2, 3-bedroom apartments. Others dying in nursing homes, overcrowded shelters, jails, prisons, where despair, prison, hopelessness are ordered. While migrants and asylum seekers, inner city refugees, inner city gypsies, casualties of Canada's and America's war against the poor, against the marginalized, against the criminalized, against the homeless, against the poor, against the different, against the unwanted, against the radicals, crimes of neoliberalism, colonialism, imperialism. Fear, terror, genocide is alive and well in democracy and fascism. Crimes of greed, gentrification, native land theft committed daily by Bay Street, Wall Street CEOs and lawyers. Crimes of planned destruction of hope. Drive-by crimes against blacks, seniors, the disabled, at blind, dysfunctional crosswalks with no traffic lights or guards in communities struggling to heal and survive drive-by violence, where young and old, brown and black and red are conned. John and Jane Doe's overdosed on fentanyl, searching for another fix. In Cabbagetown, Parkdale, Lawrence Heights, Jane and Finch, panning on the street with canes, guide dogs, in wheelchairs on Yonge and Eglinton, on Yonge and Shepherd, on Bayonne College, on Bayonne King, on Queen Street, on Dundas Street, on Sherburne Street, on Parliament Street. City sites of underfunding and undercaring. City and corporate graffiti hyping false hope and fake faith. Posted on old immigrant sweatshops along Spadina, where Eastern European Jews and homeless immigrants worked in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and longer for slave wages in non-union fire traps, where City Hall press releases promote fake poverty reduction and homeless strategies, housing strategies, hyped by you councilors, mayors, governors, and corporate media, crimes of Bay Street bank predators, greedy capitalist criminals who don't give a shit about the poor, don't give a shit about missing and murdered homeless indigenous women and girls, my sisters. CEOs, their top priorities, market share, their top priorities like market share, stock dividends, bonuses to millionaire CEOs, income redacted, crossed out on income tax forms, while you plan and justify more rent gouging schemes, while you fund more 30-story condos for offshore owner criminals like royal banks and secret trusts, sham corporations, their billions stashed, covered up in the Bahamas, Cayman Islands, the Virgin Islands, in China, in South Korea, Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, where tax evasion, tax fraud is protected by the police and dictators. Listen up, you capitalist, racist pigs. Try being refused a shelter bed at minus 30 degrees Celsius. So cold your bare skin turns blue and numb. Try role-playing, walking a mile in indigenous moccasins, panning for spare change at Bayonne King. Show us the money. Show us the beds for a change at Yonge and Dundas, Yonge and Finch, Sherburne and Dundas, Parliament and Queen, Yonge and Eglinton. Yonge and Eglinton. College and university, Bayonne King, for the criminal rich and privileged white men in banks and investment companies that pay $1,000 a day while they punch stock certificates and dividend coupons, signing fraudulent bank and corporate papers, sitting on their fat elitist self-serving asses while homeless kids, old men, John Does, Jane Does, die young at 45, penniless, homeless, sick alone, while migrants, immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, raped migrant women squat homeless on cold concrete slabs, on shelter cots, on floor mats, asleep in nightmare shelters, dozing, dreaming, on cracked crosswalks, sidewalks near potholes, tortured in stinking bedbug blankets, sick with TB, trying to get 1 to 2 hours sleep, nodding on cold streets in overcrowded violent shelters where beds and cots are 3 to 5 feet apart, with somebody's smelly infected feet in your face, shunned at City Hall by do-nothing counselors, too distracted to hear activist and survivor voices of giving testimony, painful testimony of truth, of anger, despair, hopelessness. Counselors too busy to listen to personal stories bearing witness to deaths of forgotten nameless John Does and Jane Does. Too busy to hear testimonies of survival and courage on the street, in detention, in jails, in prisons. too busy taking selfies with tourists in art galleries and restaurants, too busy voting for privileged, NIMBY neighbors, too busy to break their silence on elitism, sexism, ableism, racism, too busy to raise taxes on the rich in Rosedale, Forest Hill, where Conrad Black and other right-wing funders of white privilege hide secret deals of corruption, oppression, and justice, too busy thinking how to avoid taxes and get reelected, but not too busy to exploit homeless citizens, but not too busy to demonize, criminalize, stigmatize the homeless, the poor, the disabled, the psychiatrized, but not too busy to evict and gentrify homeless homes, historic houses on Sherburne and Parliament and Cabbage Town, too busy to meet and greet immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, while Premier Ford conservative clowns, bigots, predators with histories of sexual and physical assault, corporate crime, vote stoned for token justice, fairness, equality, fake housing strategy, fake poverty reduction. Listen up, political con artists, predators on the homeless and poor. Stop your long-winded, shameless bullshit. To hell with your empty apologies, your pathetic, hypocritical election campaign promises, lies of 1,000 more shelter beds, lies of 10,000 affordable housing units, lies denying discrimination, conflicts of interest, and more justice and charter rights you violate every day. Lies to indigenous brothers, sisters, suicidal children on native land you have polluted with oil, raped with open pit mines, poisoned with mercury by clear-cut logging in grassy narrows, in sacred boreal forests standing guard over First Nation grave sites, your partnerships with corrupt Bay Street developers, your mendacity and hypocrisy are transparent like your election campaigns, bankrolled with laundered offshore unreported secret money, sanitized, hidden in the name of privacy and privilege. Listen up, you white supremacists, racists, and bigots. We know your names. We know your addresses. You're unfit to hold public office. You're unfit to govern. Security guards, police, laws won't help. People's wrath, justice has arrived. Your time is up. It's
no, I can't see your face because the.
Did you have to cut it?